Yeah, thank you, Mexico. It's more of a comment than a question. If you take the peanut aflatoxin problem in Africa, and you see the markets, export market of peanut around the world, we are talking just about 5% of the production, world production, 5% is being exported. So 95% of the peanuts remain in countries. So we better tackle the problem locally than just thinking of market. Thank you.
So we go through a round of responses and then we continue with questions. Who wants to start? Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much. You're very right that there is a tremendous domestic market, but there is, a small. I would like to add as a comment more. See, what we export, even in terms of fresh fruits, are really handcrafted. Handicraft. I mean, I know it's a quote unquote, but there is a lot of labor involved, and I believe that Indians are not very much. I mean, we have got a little different concept. I mean, of the because we eat with hands and we do have, so we are not that much. How can I say sensitized about or that much afraid of being everything done by hand. And there is, I had a talk with Pipa yesterday that food safety as such, we have got this. I jokingly called it Chavan Prash theory. That means that what we believe as a fitness is that we can digest anything. I know it's a very generalized term, but still, so I think that's also the reason that we really didn't have so much of a health. But again, this is just as any Indian, we are mix of tradition and modern. So of course we have to go in for food safety. So not 161 chemicals, but basic 5-6 chemicals should be a bunch. And I think very soon, I don't know whether any government officer, but they are coming up with India Gap, which is called good practices, good agriculture practices for India. So probably then we will have something. Agmark is already having one, the basic set of indices, but it's not very popular. But similar like that is on the way. Thank you.
I'd just add a couple of comments. Firstly, the safety issue. Safety is actually a consumer-led issue that actually drives democratic politicians to increase safety. The problem is if the perception is if you can measure it and it's shown to be harmful, then measure it. And the trouble with this game is it's like a game of poker. He who's actually put more into the pot actually wins. And the bottom line that most of the manufacturers would take, I hate to put it as bluntly as that, well, we won't buy it, is the bottom line. And the driver to this is very much the consumer driver in terms of the safe crop. Where we can help is the technology is going to actually enable you not just to do 160, it'll enable you to do 1600 and 16,000 chemicals very, very quickly on chip-based technologies, and those are already in development. And these can often be, because they're being developed for human diagnostic purposes, they're actually equally applicable to crop-based diagnostic services. So you can actually do the test. The problem is any statistician will tell you, if you look at a 5% probability limit, if you do 20 tests, one of them is going to be abnormal. What does it mean if one's abnormal? And often these toxins hunt in pairs as well. So the complexity increases with the number of tests that you do. However, I have to be honest, I do not see a situation where the consumer market in the West is going to reduce the number of tests it's going to require. And I think we're going to have to come to some agreement about this. Soil, there's masses of research going on in terms of using and better use of soil, because currently the use of phosphate-based fertilizers is an unsustainable end goal. So there's an enormous amount of activity going in this area, and particularly with legumes and other crops, how best we can actually use it. And alpha toxin, as a clinician, is a complex problem. We all have it down as a toxin. Its actual marginal impact in relationship to hepatitis and primary liver cancer is yet something that has yet got to be really nailed down, and it's unlikely that we will ever be able to nail it down very clearly. So the 5% production is fine, but the trouble is much of the peanut export coming from where a country that I worked in close by in the Gambia, where it is the major export of the country, is exported as peanut paste. And the big anxiety is you only need one rotten peanut to actually raise your alpha toxin, because you're actually selling it as paste and not as individual peanut seeds. So you've got a very real problem by the very nature of the export that's trying to be driven, because some of the value of peanut, as you know, is in the processing rather than in the actual collection of the raw crop. So alpha toxin is a very interesting example, a very interesting health example, but yet we have got several elements of it to still resolve. We've got to resolve its precise role in relationship to cancer, particularly liver cancer. That remains a health goal of IARC in Lyon, and we've got to actually think, what is it that is actually being exported which can actually cause that contamination? And if you think alpha toxin, just think how many fungi there are out there, and nearly every one of them produces a mycotoxin. We haven't even scratched the surface of mycotoxin interactions.
Thank you. Let's continue with more questions, please.
John Lamb from Apt Associates. I'd like to contribute a few thoughts or ideas based on my experience in the produce industry. I was a fresh produce importer for 7 years and sourced several million boxes from Latin America and the Caribbean for the U.S. market. When I was sourcing, and this is true of all importers and brokers, what we're basically looking for is quality and condition of regulatory compliant product in significant volume, consistently over time, that fits the technical specifications that we want. So it's a bundle of traits, it isn't a single trait. And the regulatory compliance includes compliance with the formal safety requirements to get across the border, but also the commercial requirements of the market into which the product's going to be placed. So it's quite dangerous to think of food safety in isolation from the rest of that bundle of traits. And in fact, a decision was made by the fresh produce industry starting about in the 90s to treat food safety as a pre-competitive issue and to not to compete on it. Although there are some people that fall back once in a while, and there are differences in specifications, the produce industry is not trying to use food safety to compete with each other. There's a collective decision not to do that. I happen to sit on the advisory committee of the Global Food Safety Initiative, and that's talked about every single meeting. And whenever somebody falls back, the rest of the crowd pulls the company back in. So that's an issue that you have to be careful about. So when you talk about trying to compensate for food safety, that separates it from the value proposition that you're really sourcing. And to try to associate the cost with a price premium is not realistic given the trade's position and given the reality that every effort to differentiate by food safety trace is actually boomeranged. When pesticide residue testing came up in the early 90s, Roberta Cook from University of California, Davis, did testing and discovered that every reference to pesticides, even if it said pesticide-free, NutriClean treated, and you name it, caused a depression in the category. So the food industry stopped accepting differentiation at the level of consumer because they didn't want to depress the consumption of that category. So treating food safety in isolation, not recognizing the need to compete on the whole bundle of traits, is in fact, I think, an error that we have to be careful as we're trying to improve food safety.
Thank you. I'm just going to comment on what Professor Leslie said, and I totally agree with John that you can't really take food safety in isolation. But if you look food safety in developed world, there is a dynamic and it's a construct where all the players have their own responsibilities. It's a shared responsibility between the consumers, the industry, the provider, and the government. And there is a dynamic between the three. The government can come up with more regulations when there's a crisis, and the industry will fight back to try to have those kind of regulations be removed because there is a cost which associates that. So there is a very interesting dynamic between all the groups and the stakeholders. Now, when you look at developing countries, those kind of dynamic don't exist. And food safety really, there is a cost which is associated to food safety. And government has a role, has to invest, but developing countries, they are caught with major health problems like malaria, tuberculosis. So when you start talking about food safety, it never make the priority list for the government. So now I would like to listen to people like Buchanan, and can markets play a role and raise like food safety in developing countries in absence of a government intervention? That's the first question I have. And the second one, if you look, for example, aflatoxin cases, which was raised by someone, it's really a very interesting case because I don't think, if you look like how it's handled now, aflatoxin, for products which are exported to EU, they meet all the requirements, which are very stringent requirements. But as it's been pointed out, 95% of the production remain in developed, is consumed by the local consumers. And we had 200 deaths in Kenya in 2004 who were exposed on aflatoxins. So we have a major food safety issue which don't show on radar screens, but which is linked to liver cancer. This is documented now. Fact, is linked to liver cancer induced aflatoxins.
Thank you so much. So if we can move around here, we have 3 questions here. Here, please. Around here. Okay. I would really appreciate if we can keep the questions pretty short because I have to finish in 5 minutes. So I want as much as possible to cover as many people as I can. Can you please move with the mic? Give that mic. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's okay. You know, we are having the food security test according to the developing and the, undeveloped countries, or the developing or the developed countries. But my hunch is that, if the weather in tropical countries and in the, cold climate where the temperature is -20 and in tropical you have +45 degrees. So you should have a different set of, testings because in a wet countries, in a cold climate, the fungus is going to originate. But in tropical countries, the fungus doesn't happen so smooth because you are running the fresh fruit or any food in the 45, 35 degrees centigrade. So my question is that don't we have the different set of rules for the two countries, that is the tropical and the freezing or the cold climate countries? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So we have time for 2 more questions. Here, please.
I would like,
Yes.
I would like to give my views on food safety. I have been working with the government for a number of years looking after export certification. I have been looking after food safety for exports with the government of India for the last number of years. And what I would like to say is that we cannot test the safety of a product. You cannot build safety into a product by testing, but you have to look at it from the raw material till the end product stage. And I like this comment which was made that we are handcrafting our products for exports. I agree it's a fact, but we need to analyze why are we doing that for exports, not for domestic. And here my view is, I'll give you a very small example of fishery products, marine products. We have been exporting and the EU has been rejecting based on nitrofuran metabolites. And we had been telling the exporters about it and the farmers, and we've had so many educational programs, but still there's no improvement. And this year we were the largest rejections from EU for nitrofuran metabolites. So what I would like to suggest is that we need to, why are the farmers using nitrofurans? That's because they don't have an alternative. They're not able to find an alternative. So we need education, communication, coming out with research and development work for the developing countries. And then the government has to play a very strong role in addressing it. I mean, we just cannot blame the developing world or the developed world. We all have to play our role in it and come out with solutions, because the farmer understands business sense, but he should know how to do it. So that's my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So here, please, can you pass the mic back?
Yeah, my simple question is because certification is very important issue, of course. And but I think that this is not so simple as we are discussing here, that even the small and marginal farmer can do it. My own experience is in Punjab. I took a sample of 150 organic farmers who commit that we are doing organic farming. And to our surprise, none of them, they were certifying their product. And even they say, if they were getting some kind of certification from the government, that involves a lot of cost as well as very lengthy procedure. And still they say, some NGO is working there to promote this organic farming, and they're getting this product certified from them only. Still they say, what is the reliability? Farmer is doing organic farming on 2 acres and chemical farming on another 3 acres. And even if they mix the product, because the organic farming is being sold at the premium price. So what is the guarantee even if they are satisfied, whether they're mixing it or not. So certification is not so simple issue. I think we should take it in a so long where the product is coming from millions of farmers.
Thank you. Yes, the last question, please.
There is a very important point that I was hoping to have to at least address or raise. This is the importance of the role of the government in law enforcement. We in IFAD, for example, the International Fund for Agricultural Development, we try to promote production of at the small farm level of, for example, milk, where the farmers would try to do their best. However, when it ends at the end to the consumer, the milk is completely contaminated. And when we asked the question, they said, yes, we are doing our best. However, throughout the value chain, those who are testing and making sure that it's of high quality, they get bribes, and these are, unfortunately, are government employees, and the law is not being enforced. Therefore, one of the issues, perhaps, that you mentioned, the top 3 priorities, is the law enforcement, and it has to be real, not just on paper.
Okay, thank you so much, and sorry we cannot continue with questions, but let me give a minute to each of the panelists to close, so we can start from my left.
Very simply, I think there is a very complex dynamic that's actually exists here. If you reduce the complexity of that dynamic and the impact of the health sector on food production will impact adversely on communities. It's absolutely vital that you do not seek to divide those two elements. So it's clear that we have to move forward. I would ask you to look very carefully at the toxin issue and the safety issue that you've raised. I think it is an issue that, as was raised rightly to my right, there is a particular problem that in the developed world, the major contract is between the consumer and government, which then drives the producer to actually have to do this. It's a different dynamic in the developing world. And that has to be understood because a single outbreak of anything in the West can bring downfalls of complete governments, as you saw with the egg scandals and the Conservative government of John Major, a major contributing part to the collapse of government. So these issues are very important. So I do think that actually by working together, we can get there. The universities will provide the academic underpinning, they will provide the research into how we actually get round to better measurement, better evaluation, and development of better crops. But at the end of the day, the dynamic is the production dynamic that has to work, and that means understanding the community that has to survive by its agricultural productivity, and that impacts directly on certification and on the capacity to export, which is your highest value crop and the biggest economic return to that community. And that's why people do it. They don't do it for fun and in order to achieve those standards. They do it because it's the best economic value to that community.
Thank you so much. Pippa?
I really appreciate the comments that people are making about the focus on export. And I think one of the things we need to do is to move away from this assumption that it's only those who are able to pay that are interested in food safety. I think that people in poor and developing countries, you just need to look at the rise of the mobile phone. It's a very high cost input, but people see the benefit that they get out of it. And you find mobile phones everywhere now. If you travel in Africa into the most isolated and poorest regions. I think we need to start moving away from this question of whether people are able to pay and look at the question of information. And that is it's a very complex question as well, because you're looking at issues of health, and in different communities, as Bhushan raised, health means different things. Apollo again, he says, food safety means will mean something different to everybody in this room. So while I think that information is crucial and that the use of media is crucial, and especially in relation to the consumer, and remember producers are consumers as well, I think that these issues are complex, and I think that we need to find ways that we can reach domestic markets as well as people who are not even selling their produce but are eating them directly, and start to get that information and understanding across.
Thank you. Apollo?
Yeah, I also think that when you look at the numbers that Piper was mentioning in terms of food safety, food contamination related issues, then it's pretty important that that focus still has to be maintained, and still that has to be scrutinized in a way that brings up sufficient knowledge base to the producers to be careful and to be to have best practice in getting products that are safe to the consumers. Ultimately, health issues arise from what you consume. The other related issues, as we talked about before, would be resulting from different things. But what we consume and directly affects our health, definitely there has to be care in how it is handled. So I believe best practice is very crucial from across the supply chain.
Thank you.
Yeah, my comment is that if I can summarize, thank you for your comments. The most important thing is that at least in India, we are really really well articulated consumer pressure is not there, as already said by Dr. Lazik, that is really absent part, and I'm sure that it will come up and we will have a different scenario. And I'm very sorry if it has sounded that certification it's simple. It is not. I just meant that it is successful. I have cried, howled, broken my head, everything for last 20 years. So no, it is not simple. I agree with you. There are many issues, but again, if just by making more information, more knowledge, we can have the market incentives also about the safe foods. That's the only way as I can see. Thank you.
So, thank you. Let me thank all the panelists and thank you so much for all your questions. Please remember that from 2:30 to 3 we have the outdoors fair, which is open, and at 3 p.m. sharp we will start with the plenary session. So please join me in thanking the panelists. Thank you so much.